Good morning, everyone. We're starting over a second time, starting late and starting over because the computers are not cooperating, but we are figuring it out. So today is Monday, and Monday is Money Day because that helps me remember that I need to speak to you from time to time about the fact that if you enjoy the work that I'm doing, we're doing here, it would be very helpful if you could put some financial resources behind it. Doesn't have to be much, but something that represents your commitment to the mission of the Masters, as we call it. You can go through the Patreon website, which is a marvelous website which connects creative people, innovative people with those who would like to support what they're doing. And that's a way to subscribe regularly. It has a few perks. You also get access to the paid classes that I do, and you get a couple of extra videos a month that just go to those subscribers. You can also go through PayPal, Mission of the Masters. You can go to my website, Asha Joy. There's a donate button that will take you through everything if you just want to help occasionally. It's very gratifying and energizing for me to not be doing this alone. Of course, we're not alone because we have the mission of the Masters behind us. But it's nice to have a little human support in it too, and to know that what I'm doing is succeeding in the way that I pray that it succeeds, which is it makes a difference in people's spiritual life. Swamiji was extraordinarily generous with me and with countless others in just passing on to us what he had learned from Master, and I try to walk in his giant footprints and pass on to you all everything that he gave to us as much as I can. And when I hear from you that that's making a difference in your life, well, that makes a big difference in mine. So this circle just keeps going in the most beautiful possible way. So thank you. Thank you for enabling, supporting, being enthusiastic, being receptive. Deep gratitude to all of you and to God and Guru for this opportunity. So now, let's start with the prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to feel your living presence, that everything we do will be a reflection of that higher guidance. We are your children, doing our best to find our way back to our divine home. Guide us and bless us. Om. Peace. Amen. We are still working with how to work with people through Swami Kriyananda's wonderful little book, The Art of Supportive Leadership. I had a conversation yesterday with some friends that I don't get to see very often. We just shared a cup of tea yesterday afternoon and wide-ranging conversation about everything. But somehow in that context, the idea, which is always in my mind, of the time that I spent with Swami, was being talked about in a certain way. And I said that one of the experiences of being with Swamiji was that whenever I was with him, and it didn't matter if we were having a meeting with a lawyer, if we were going to the dry cleaners, if we were just sitting in his house having tea, if we were traveling around the world, if we were in some huge program in Mumbai, India. I mean, just there were lots of different experiences. The characteristic experience for me of being with Swami was that when I was with him, I was content. I don't mean that my complicated psychology left me or anything like that. But whenever I was where he was, no part of me ever wanted to be anywhere else. And it's very interesting because by contrast, of course, I'm often pulling in different directions. And if I was doing something, well, for Swami, but especially with Swamiji, even if it was just a mundane task, whatever it might be, I was always perfectly content to do it. Because his consciousness, I mean, now you could say it was my affection for him, that it was just, he was the living person that I loved most in the world, and therefore I was in that company. You know, it was an impersonal kind of love. It wasn't the same kind of the rest of my friendships, although, well, this is what I'm going to say. I've tried to move everything in the direction of Swami. But just, it was the center of the universe. It was the center of the physical world. So if I was where he was, I was standing in the center of the physical world. So there was no place else in the physical world that I would want to be, because I was right at the center. In fact, one of the most interesting experiences I had right after he died, he died on a Saturday night in California. It was Saturday night in California. And on Monday morning, he died in Italy. I live in California. He died on a Saturday night. We did our Sunday service. On Sunday afternoon, it occurred to us that we should go to Italy because there was going to be a ceremony and his body was still there. So we got tickets, and by Monday, I was in the Rome airport on the way to Assisi. I was sitting in the Rome airport. I had traveled all over the world to be where Swami was, and often traveling internationally, you have stages of travel. You're in this airport while you wait for the next plane to come. You're in a bus or a car or a train. Just, you know, there's lots of stages. The stage of landing at the Rome airport in Italy, then either getting into a car, being picked up by someone, getting on a train to get up to Assisi was just the next phase of it. Whenever I was traveling to see Swami, it was just a straight line with as few pauses as possible. We didn't stop to sightsee along the way. It's just like once it was karmically appropriate to move, it just moved. We arrived on Monday. Swami has died on Saturday night. There's no hurry. And there were people converging from several different places on Rome at that time, and we were all arriving within an hour or two of each other. And so I settled down with my friends in a coffee shop in the airport. And we basically just drank coffee and chatted for maybe like 3 hours until everybody was there, and then we went off together. Sitting there, I was so discombobulated, because I was on my way to see Swami, in a sense, although all I was going to be seeing was his empty body at that point. But his spirit was still very strong there at that point. But there was no hurry. And when we actually were there in Assisi, and there was this ceremony that they had, and I was one of those who spoke a little bit, and Swami's body was right in front of us. It was in a casket. Before we got there, it had just been laid out on a table, but now it was in a casket, but it was an open casket, and he was lying there as bodies lie there, mostly covered with flowers, but also just lying there. And I kept looking for the point of focus in the room. Where is Swami? I'm looking at his body, but it wasn't quite in his body. And then they started playing some recording of his voice. Maybe he was singing. So I thought he was in the loudspeaker, which was visual. And so I'm looking at the loudspeaker because that's where the voice is coming from. It's not coming from there either. I looked to the pictures on the altar, and there's no picture of Swami on the altar. I finally looked at the spiritual eye, which was above the pictures of the masters. That was the closest I came to finding out where he was, because that also interiorized my consciousness more. But it was also, none of that was like emotionally upsetting. Naturally, I wasn't happy that Swami had left his body, but goodness, he had been so unwell, and he was already 86, I think, 87. I mean, really, you had to be pretty stupid to know it wasn't coming. So that wasn't exactly the issue. I had told him years before, it won't be much fun when you leave the planet. And he referenced back to when he was 25, after only 3.5 years, and Master left the planet. I said, it won't be much fun. I said, you should go, of course. Don't, it would be unspeakably selfish to even have an opinion about whether you should stay. But it won't be any fun once you leave. Swami said, I know, I've been through it. Just like that. And it hasn't been nearly as much fun since Swami left the planet. But being there, and I was in that ceremony, it was that was first in the coffee shop, and then sitting there, I realized that the whole earth had just become the same to me. Whereas in all my spiritual life prior to that, there was always a center. Even if that center was 10,000 miles away from where I was, that was the center. And so when I would move into that center, I would be perfectly content. Where on earth would I want to be except here? But see, what that gave me was an experience of what that feels like. You see, this is the effect that the saints, the realized beings, the elevated spiritual souls that we have the privilege to be in their company, either because of our orientation toward them and because of the magnetism that is their consciousness. And if one is receptive to that magnetism, it's a greater magnetism than one's own, begins to shift our magnetism. That's how spiritual growth works. It doesn't work from being scolded and instructed in this way. And of course, it's very helpful to be scolded and instructed, but that's not really what changes us. What changes us is when our own vibration shifts and we experience a new reality. See, this is the difference between knowing it intellectually. And if you have a quick mind like I do, and even this sort of facile way with words, I can spin a lot of this stuff out. And so I can really tell the difference between what I can spin and who I am. And of course, we all have to talk a little bit beyond ourselves. I never talk beyond what I have firm belief in. And I never go into areas where I really don't know what I'm talking about, because it's just too embarrassing, even if I could put the words together. But what I really know, meaning what my spontaneous instinctive response would be before there's any chance of the intellect getting in it. And so we have those experiences. And our spiritual life is really stringing together enough of those experiences that it becomes who we are. When I've been in this community, I've been in Ananda for 50 years. I've been in the community that I'm in here for more than 30 and helped really bring it into manifestation. And when I think back about my life as a community leader, or as a clergy person, or however you want to think about it, my self-definition is really, really simple. I need to do everything I can to facilitate inspiring experiences for people. You know, music, pageantry, liturgy, poetry, inspiration, wisdom, all of that, to facilitate an experience for people. And it doesn't matter whether there's 100 people in the room or 2. It's just, if we facilitate inspirational experiences, people's lives become different. Because those experiences, the restless hunger that is characteristic of every sentient being, but much more consciously present in human beings because it's a more advanced life form, that restless hunger is for divine fulfillment. I mean, we test it out in lots of other ways, but we're never content. Our heart is, we were made for thee alone, and our hearts are restless till we find our rest in thee. I believe this was St. Augustine who said that. So we just have this insatiable, seemingly insatiable restlessness until we're fed the nutrients which is God awareness. God awareness is the nutrients we're really looking for. And when that God awareness comes to us, all of a sudden, we're not hungry. When in my own trajectory of truth seeking, I was a seeker without knowing what I was looking for until I was 18, and then I was introduced through Vivekananda to the self-realization teachings. I immediately recognized it. Nobody in my little world had ever mentioned those things to me, but it was 1966 probably, and the whole Eastern spirituality was just invading America, especially California where I live. And as soon as Vivekananda's book was put in my hand, the details of it are fuzzy to me. I must have opened the book, I must have read it, I must have talked to it with my friends. I remember lots of little fragments of it. But my feeling about it is when the book came into my hand, I knew it like this, but I certainly must have had to read some of it before that point. But it was the missing vitamin in my life, which was meaning, clarity, truth. But then I still, it was sort of like a drink of water, but it wasn't the full meal until Swami walked into the room. And when he walked into the room, one moment in the company of a saint will be your raft over the ocean of delusion. That's an aphorism from India. And it's not rational, but I just knew. And I knew because I'd had this insatiable, restless longing for something. And because I was trying to figure out how to be, I think that's actually how to be a person. And there were lots of good people in my life, including my own parents. But I didn't want to be them. I just hadn't met anybody that I wanted to be. And then I met Swami, and I instantly knew I wanted to be who he was. And it would have been an impulsive decision, except after 50 years it looks like there's a kind of steadiness to it, since I've never wavered from it. But all of that is that, the reason I'm talking about it and ignoring everything else I might have said this morning is because it struck me so strongly when I said that. I said it to my friends yesterday. I was always content. I knew that. It wasn't a surprise. But I was really thinking about what it means. That's like coming to peace. I didn't come to peace in the sense, as I said already, I didn't become God realized. But I knew that I was right where I needed to be. Everything that was possible to come to me could come to me in that context. But it was the feeling itself. Why would I not always feel that way? Because Swami's consciousness was not limited to his body. His presence in my life is the same. And for most of my life, I didn't live with Swami Kriyananda. I didn't live in the same community that he lived in. I did for the first 16 years, but not since then. I would see him often, and I was continuously in touch with him. So there was a lot. And he would appear in my living room on a regular basis. It's taken me a long time to realize that he's not going to appear again. But the connection was not dependent on the physical presence. So therefore, the connection, and what to speak of Yogananda, whom I never met in the body, who was gone long before I knew about him. But there was no obstacle to his presence. So why would I be more content in the company of one physical being than I would be all the time? What is the limiting factor? Oh, let me guess. How about me? How about the ability or the inability to be receptive? And this is where St. John in the Bible says about Jesus, to all who received him, to them gave he the power. Everything comes down to that, to the receptivity. Because you have to realize this. We have this thought in our mind that Swami is more present where his physical body is. Master was more present where his physical body is. Oh, if only I could live with him. But they are unconditioned in their loving, in their consciousness, in their emanation of light. They are constant. It's hard for us to imagine because we live so much in a world of duality. They are absolutely constant. So if we experience it as intermittent, it's not because they are being intermittent. They are being constant. It's just like on a sunny day, you can close your blackout curtains and your room gets dark. But that hasn't had anything to do with the sun outside the window. It's just whether you open them or close them. And it appears, from our perspective, that it's gotten dark or it's gotten bright. But from the perspective of the source, nothing has ever changed. It's we who have shifted and not shifted. In the same way, when I was first at the seclusion retreat working in the kitchen, and Swami Kriyananda at that time, we're talking 1971, 72, for a time Swamiji would give every other Sunday service. And it was our custom and my responsibility to prepare a lunch. And after that Sunday service was over, the whole community would gather and we'd all have lunch together. On the Sundays that Swami gave service, I just did everything I could to make the most delectable lunch that I could make, which I was a pretty bad cook at that point, but I did my very best. Gradually, I learned to be good at it. On the Sundays when Swami wasn't there, any old leftovers will do. I mean, we were a family. I was like the mom cooking for the family, so it wasn't like I was trying to impress them with how glorious a cook I was. So I don't know if they even noticed, but inside of me it was so different. And then one day, thank you, God, the obvious question answered. What am I doing? Like I put out all this energy for Swamiji, but these are my brothers and sisters. These are equal manifestations of the divine. God is equally present in all of them. And I also realized, of course, it was much more fun to give my whole heart to it. And this is why love relationships are given to us. Divine love relationships are elevating love to a higher and higher level. I remember we were complaining once about a certain person in the community who was, to our experience, had been quite selfish. Swami said, but they're very unselfish with me, speaking about Swami himself. He said, which means they have it in them to be unselfish. And I thought, I always remembered that. It's like if we can do it when we're highly motivated, that means we're highly capable of doing it. If I could be content in Swami's physical company, that meant I had it in me to be content. Because I knew how to access that quality. I lived in it, I could feel it. And so it was perfectly possible to be that way all the time. When I was cooking with so much care and attention, I could do it every Sunday. There was just no reason at all why I couldn't do it every Sunday. It was a ridiculous choice I was making myself. So of course, we make the ridiculous choice to feel bereft and lonely and restless a lot. And we do it because we have all these unresolved vrittis in us. And yeah, this is the process. I'm not criticizing myself or criticizing anyone else. But it's a very, I find at least, a very useful question. It's like, why am I not receptive all the time? Yes, you might say it was easier. Swami was immensely entertaining. He was so funny. The conversation was always stimulating. Interesting things would happen. He was charming company. It was fun. It was just fun. Even when it was tough, it was fun because we had to go through all the years of litigation and blah, blah, blah. There was a lot of stuff that happened, and it wasn't all sparkling like that. But the inner experience was there. So it was easier, and he kept the energy up. His vibration, it was just this constant vibration moving through the room at all times. that it was easier to get in the way. So it was definitely easier. But that didn't mean it was impossible. And once you have that expiring experience, you know what it is. You know where the doorway is. You know what it feels like. You know, I can feel, I can recognize, the little dark forces. I can recognize the blackout curtains that are fighting to close off the sun. And you have to just put out that energy to do it. Anyway, these were the thoughts that were in my mind. There was one more that I'll say, because when I spoke to my friends, I spoke of two things. First was being content, and the other was hope is actually the right word. My name, Asha, means hope. Somebody asked me once, I was given several questions in a row at a satsang. One of them was, what does Asha mean? So I said, it means hope. It's a very simple name. I really like that. Then a couple of questions later were, could you summarize the spiritual path in one word? And I sort of, one word. I said, hope. Just like that. Because as long as you have hope, you're encouraged. It's like, as long as there's hope, you don't give up. And at that time, I was profoundly touched to realize, I've always known, but to realize how perfectly Swami named me. Because what I actually said is I always felt encouraged. When I was in Swami's presence, I always felt encouraged. He believed in me, against all common sense at times. But he believed in me. But it wasn't special. He didn't believe in me. He believed in all of us. And he didn't believe in all of us because we were behaving well or living up to our own potential or anything like that. He believed in us because it was a divine fact. It was a divine fact. And if we crossed his path, what to speak of living at Ananda or really being in his presence, if we crossed his path, that meant it had occurred to us that God is the answer. And Master says it in countless places, once that desire enters your heart, you will never be content until you have fulfilled it. So of course he believed in us. What did time matter? Time was just more suffering, but in the end, compared to eternity, all time is short. And once all delusion has been banished, it's like it was never there. It's just gone. You just can't remember. You can picture yourself that way, but you can't ever imagine being that way. And that encouragement, that's also what God is offering us. Swami put it this way, whenever you feel discouraged, you know it's Satan. And whenever you feel encouraged, despite all the evidence to the contrary, you know that you are in touch with Master. Because he believes in us. He knows us as we are. Swamiji tells us that story of Master when he was in a very elevated bhav looking at all the monks. And he said, oh, if you could only see yourself as I see you, you would see that you are nothing but light, beautiful light. So it's not just that we need to look at others with the eyes of the Guru. We have to see ourselves in that same light. So, God bless you.